Hey, I'm David Niles, and you're listening to Catholic versus Catholic.
If you would, please just tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you believe, and how you came to believe it.
Okay, well, I am almost 32 years old. I have a beautiful wife. We have 3 beautiful daughters. Bernadette was 6 weeks old now, so we have a lot of fun. She just started smiling. It's a very exciting time. I am a cradle Catholic. I adopted the Catholic faith as my own a little bit after college. I think, like a lot of people, I fell away from the faith, not in the sense that I stopped believing in what the church taught. I just kind of didn't care. And I found myself saying, yes, I'll come back to that later. I'll come back to that later. And praise God, I actually did. But I know that that is treacherous territory, that type of attitude. But I have excellent parents. I grew up in a very devout home. So the church has always been true for me. I've never not believed what the Catholic faith offers as true. I've always known it was true. But like I said, there were just times in my life where I didn't value the truth very much. And now that I'm a dad, you really have a good perspective. Your perspective changes when you have kids, when you're the one in charge of teaching them everything that they have to know. You really do come to see what's important in life.
Speaking of very young children, can you talk a little bit about your early experiences of faith and religion?
Sure, yeah. This isn't necessarily my earliest memory, but it's certainly one of the more impactful memories that I have. I remember I was probably 6, 7. We were all sitting around the dinner table, just talking, doing normal family dinner table stuff, and my dad kind of stopped the conversation, and we could kind of tell that he was about to say something. And so a hush came over the table, and he said, kids, nothing matters if you don't go to heaven. And I remember just kind of looking at him and looking at my brothers and sisters and saying like, oh, yeah, okay, Dad, like that's cool. And then we went back to just regular dinner conversation. So it was kind of out of the blue, it seemed like, but it was just one of those memories that I never forgot. And I remember even thinking about it later, like, yeah, if you don't make it to heaven, then you just wasted your whole life. You just threw the whole thing away if you don't get to heaven, because that's really the only thing that matters in this life. And now that I'm a dad and a husband, I understand that I have other people I need to help get to heaven too, but you cannot give what you do not have. And so you have to have the eternal life within you, so to speak, so that you can give it away.
Can you compare your naive childhood faith to your adult faith and your prayers as a child to your adult prayers? Can you just give a quick compare and contrast?
Yeah, when I was a kid, it was much about memorization and saying the prayers, like the rosary, for instance. When I was a kid, the rosary was it would really wear me out, because I felt like I had to say the Hail Mary and put everything I had into the words, meaning each word of the Hail Mary. I didn't have the understanding of the rosary being a contemplative prayer. Instead of focusing so much on the words of the Hail Mary, instead meditate on the mystery. And once you learn to do that, praying the rosary doesn't become something that uses energy. It actually becomes a restful, leisurely prayer that I find myself energized after having prayed, or very sleepy, either one. But my prayer life now, I won't pretend to have a deep mystical prayer life, even if I joke around about having that sometimes. But it's certainly much different. Just the way that you have a different perspective on things as an adult from when you're a child. And like I said, I don't know, I brought this up a couple times. Being a dad, when I pray the Our Father, that really changed for me once I became a dad. And also, one time I was praying, and I actually started referring to God the Father as Daddy, sort of like what Jesus does when he calls him Abba. You know, a good translation of that is Father, but it's more familial than that. You know, it's sort of like calling him Daddy. And I don't call my dad Father, you know, unless I'm just kind of kidding around. But as a kid, I called him Daddy. So that word really had more significance to me. And so when I thought about God the Father as my daddy, that really was a deep moment for me. That's one example.
I mean, the sad thing is that we tend to see all the analogies of faith as being exaggerated when really we haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg in terms of how profound and deep the realities of God are and how shallow our little shadows are here. Like when you say daddy and you act sort of like a child as a full-grown man, a father of your own children, we tend to laugh at that and say, oh, you're being silly and you're exaggerating your childlike relationship to God the Father, when in reality, we are such pathetic and helpless and dependent creatures that even if you put on a diaper and started saying goo goo gaga, you still wouldn't even be close to getting at the reality of our dependence on God.
I totally agree with you. I think God must think that we are just so cute. The way, you know, the way that we think a toddler or an infant is, you know, a toddler says, "Oh, let me help you make pancakes," and you say, "Okay, all right, I'm going to measure the flour and here." You know, it's like they're not really doing anything, but you're kind of like letting them feel like they're helping, and you know, you like it and they like it, and like I don't know. I feel like that's a fraction of the way he probably sees us, you know, because he gives us the grace to do everything. We couldn't do anything unless he gave us the grace to do it. So, you know, it's like how much credit can we take? About as much as my 2-year-old can take credit for the pancakes that show up on the table on Saturday morning.
One of my favorite saints, and the saint that converted me to Catholicism from generic monotheism, is Saint Augustine, as I like to call him, or Saint Augustine. But he famously said, and I found it quite controversial at the time, but all the truths of Catholicism are astonishing. But he said that when God turns his face from us, it's not so much out of anger as to hide his laughter. So he was describing a similar sort of situation with the relationship of parent to child and just the cuteness of it. And I personally, I was a great sinner as an atheist for 25 years. And I really feel so lucky to have been blessed with conversion, and I'm blessed to have been given the grace to say yes to God when a lot of people say maybe or later, like you talked about saying later to a conversion as an adult and so on and so forth. I really feel lucky.
Yes, I feel that way too, David. You know, it's interesting. You're a convert. Me being a cradle Catholic, sometimes I'm envious of converts because they know very well. I think they have a better appreciation for that which they have received. Whereas cradle Catholics like myself, you know, it's just always been this way. And so it takes extra effort, I think, to really sit down and meditate on the value of these gifts and what they mean in your life. And I mean very physical, real, the way that they have changed your life in ways that you can't understand because they've always been that way. But yeah, the truths of the faith, it's just we see through a mirror so dimly. We have no idea.
I like what you said, that everything is grace. I strongly believe that. It's one of my favorite meditations. And when I was talking about my conversion just now, the point I'm trying to get at here is that this whole notion of sin really transformed when I found God, or when God touched me and I was converted. I really have a much lighter view of sin. I have a very dark and heavy and ominous and grave view of unrepentance, but my view of sin really has undergone a great rehabilitation. Sin really is not a big deal. It's unrepentance that's a big deal. Now, sin, we should avoid sin because future sins, as St. Augustine also said, future sins are very serious, but the past sins, don't worry about it. It's in the past, you know. So I want to just talk a little bit about the nature of sin. Why is it exaggerated in the minds of the non-believers? I've been accused of Catholic guilt by non-Catholics so many times. I've never ever ever felt Catholic guilt within the church because I've had my sins forgiven. It's so easy to, well, it's not necessarily easy, but it's so simple to walk into the confessional and to be forgiven. So can you talk a little bit about the psychological barrier to Catholicism, to entering into the church and entering into that space that is so vast and so fresh inside the confessional? What is keeping people outside of the confessional?
If people admit that they're wrong, that means that they are going to have to change. And people don't want to change. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance in our heads when we realize, you know what, I've been wrong. And there is a phenomenon that occurs psychologically when you rationalize decisions. And people are often unaware that they've done this. However, your brain is incapable of making a choice that it does not view to be the best choice. Now, sometimes you might add elements to the equation that aren't actually there. So you say, well, I know this choice A might be better, but if I choose choice B, maybe I'll look good in front of these people. And so that's what you do, because the extra benefit of looking good kind of tips the scales in its direction. But psychologically, you're aware of the fact that you have added elements to the equation that don't exist in reality. And so when confronted that B was the wrong choice, you actually have like this toddler behavior when you tell them you can't have a candy bar. It's like, well, they want a candy bar, and it's a very emotional response. So in my own life, I still experience fear walking into the confessional. And I always feel amazing leaving the confessional, but there's just that element of, I know that what I've done is wrong, or I know that I need to change, and I'm embarrassed. I think maybe that's what it is. I'm just embarrassed that I have failed in these ways. And I'm embarrassed that, the priest is maybe he's going to judge me. And I know that that doesn't happen. I've talked to so many priests. Many of them have told me that literally they do not remember what you said. So they can't really judge you if that's the case. But we just need to get over that and kind of take the right perspective on confession. It's not that God is there to judge us and, be the judge who's like, well, fine, I will have mercy on you one more time, but don't do it again. God is sitting there saying, please, please, please come to me. I am begging you, let me forgive you. It's his favorite song of all. It's the song of the redeemed. And that's every man who walks in and out of the confessional.
Yeah, again, to quote St. Augustine, he said, humility is the one thing that God finds irresistible in his creatures. And so I guess there is a bit of a connection between humiliation and humility. I mean, they have the same root.
Yeah.
But we are proud. Pride really is the root of all evil, I think. And I'm chock full of it even to this day. And I pray the litany of humility. I can't say it's working too well, or maybe God's waiting for, to deliver the goods. Maybe it's like the check's in the mail kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually very proud of my humility. I don't know if you know this, but I won the 2017 International Humility Award. And David, the trophy for this last year, it is gorgeous. It's at least 7 feet tall. I'm actually working on building a new display case to house it in. When I'm done, I think you should be able to see it from the street. So I'm very, very proud of my humility.
So when I spoke with Adam last night, I asked him a lot of questions about friendship, because it seems like the two of you have a good friendship. Talk to me a little bit about friendship. What is it?
Yeah, so I would say that friendship is a self-giving love that you have for another person who's not your spouse. And maybe I shouldn't use the term spouse in defining it, but I just do that as a comparison. But there's many similarities, because it's a truly deep love in that a true friendship seeks only the good of the other, just like you do in a marriage. And I think in order to form a good friendship, there must be something in common. So he and I are definitely good friends. We've been best friends since kindergarten, and actually he lives across the street from me. So it's really beautiful. We both have young families, and now we're getting to watch our kids play together and be friends. So it really is something that I wish everybody had. And a lot of people, I think most people have a really good friend, that one friend in their life that you say, that guy would do anything. Like if I needed $1,000, he'd give it to me.
Can you talk to me a little bit about your struggle to be holy, to be pure, to be a faithful follower of Jesus Christ? What is holiness? What is the essence of it? And how can we move towards it? And how can we know if we're moving towards it?
Well, in the Bible, we learn that only God is holy. So for us, what does that mean? Does that mean that we can't be holy? And no, that's not what it means. But what it means is that if we want to be holy, we need to become like him. We need to diminish so that he can increase. So to pursue holiness is to pursue a life of aligning your own will with God, almost as if you cease to have a will of your own. And that's something that our mother Mary, Our Lady, was able to do and did so perfectly throughout her life. And that's why she's the best example of holiness. I mean, just you can look at the saints, and that's what they have done. Their own desires, their own will fades away, and they simply possess the will of God for their own life and for others. And it's only when we do that that we can truly love like he loves, and that we can be the people that we were made to be. We were made for holiness. We were made in his image, and our ultimate destiny is in heaven when we will be perfected and we will become like him. So in this life, we must pursue this. We must seek, especially as men, I think we have an obligation to learn to deny ourselves, especially denying ourselves if you're married for the sake of your wife, for the sake of your children. When you read Ephesians 5, this is Paul's great writing on married life. Typically people, men will stop reading after wives, be submissive to your husbands, but it goes on to talk about husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. So if wives are being submissive, having submission, they are putting themselves under the mission of the husband. What's the husband's mission? The husband's mission is to love his wife and to die for her. So all of a sudden, when you read the full passage, it actually becomes a lot more onerous on the men. What's it telling women? Women, allow your husbands to serve you. Husbands, serve your wives. Love them as you love yourself. Embracing and following God's will. Well, what's God's will? That's a big question. It's hard to know. I think the place that we need to start is, what's your vocation? Are you married? Are you a priest? Are you single? Whatever it is, knowing your vocation, it's going to exclude a lot of things that say, well, now I know that's not what I'm called to do, and I'm kind of called to run in this lane. And so when we learn to deny ourselves, to sacrifice our own will in order to embrace his, that's when we can truly find peace. That's when we can find joy. I mean, ultimately, if you want to sum it up, you could say, if you want to be happy in this life, then you need to do God's will, because his will is the path to the highest happiness that you can have. And ultimately, it will bring you a great reward in heaven. So that's what we need to focus on. And there's a lot of distractions in life. There's so much noise. We need to learn to put down Facebook, social media. So many of us, myself included, are just addicted to looking at the screen all the time, and it has the effect of taking our minds away from contemplating deeper mysteries, deeper truths. Instead, I'm just mindlessly scrolling through my news feed or checking to see how many likes I got on my last post. And I do those things, and I wish I didn't sometimes, but it's something that I work on too, so we need to learn to do all those things. Sometimes you'll hear guys say, oh, I would die for my wife. I would die for my kids. I would die for whoever. I think, well, do you? When was the last time you fasted for your wife? When was the last time you gave something up silently where even she didn't know it? Nobody knew it but you, and it was your gift, your death to her. If we're not doing those things on a regular basis, then why do we think that we would be able to do the greater? God forbid, none of us will ever be called to actually die physically for our wives, but maybe we will. And so having that practice day to day, whether we're ever called to martyrdom or not, is something that will help align our will with God's will.
We're all called to martyrdom, just not all to a bloody martyrdom, right?
Sure, right,
So,
yeah.
a few things he brought to mind. First of all, a minor point, which is that on Facebook, I downloaded an app called Facebook Purity. So my news feed is non-existent. I don't have a news feed. I don't see what any of my friends are up to. I only use it for Messenger to communicate with people and to arrange interviews. Like this interview right now was arranged on Facebook, and we're speaking right now through the Messenger phone app on Facebook. So it serves its purpose for me. But I'm not scrolling through a bunch of kittens and Donald Trump nonsense, which gives me nothing.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, man.
The other thing I wanted to say that you brought to mind was this idea of laying down your life. And Scott Hahn actually made a really colorful depiction of the fall of Adam and Eve. And he sort of interpreted it in such a way that when Satan said, when you eat the fruit, you will not die, there was an implication in that if you don't eat it, you will die, because he was a big, scary dragon. He wasn't a cute little garden snake. And there's a sort of idea that Adam was called to be the husband to the wife, to protect the wife, and to be courageous and stand up to the dragon. And he didn't. And he paid the price, and I'm paying the price now. You're paying the price now. Your kids and your wife are paying the price right now. Every evil is a result of sin, both original and actual. So we're all paying the price. And who paid the biggest price, of course, is Jesus Christ, who suffered infinitely for all of our sins. Whether you take that story literally in every way or just in some ways, there is definitely a fall. It's, as G.K. Chesterton said, it's the one dogma that we can prove just by picking up the daily newspaper.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
So I want to talk about purity. As a married man, how do you avoid looking at the sexy women that are in reality and on TV and in movies and all this sort of thing? I know you can avoid explicit pornography, but the problem is today that a lot of stuff is sort of soft porn, and it's everywhere, and people don't even notice that it's so hypersexualized, the world that we live in. Even billboards, I've seen billboards that have made me blush. How do you avoid it? And what do you do to avert your eyes, or what prayers do you say, or are you just not bothered by the beauty of women's bodies?
Well, I don't know that you can avoid it. Aside from becoming a Carthusian and living your life in a cell in utter silence for the rest of your life, you're not going to avoid it. And I think that part of dealing with it is admitting that there's nothing you can do to 100% avoid it. The next thing, and this is something that my wife has really helped me with, is should we really be watching this movie? You know, because my attitude has been, I'm an adult, I'm not a child anymore. You know, I don't need to censor myself because I now know the difference, but you know, these things are wrong, and I know that, so therefore I can watch it, or you know, whatever, just movies, you know. And she really challenged me on that and said, you know, well, should we be watching it? And then I realized after I thought about it, well, no, actually, we don't need to watch this. First of all, it's probably just a stupid movie anyway. You know, what am I missing by not watching this particular movie? Nothing. There are a lot better things I could be doing with my life anyway. But let's talk about yoga pants. Yoga pants are not real pants, okay? They're underwear pants. I think that women really don't understand the distraction that is. It's almost like someone has tied a rope onto your forehead and is sitting there just tugging on it with all their might, trying to get you to look at them. And it is my greatest desire to treat this woman in this hypothetical example with the dignity that she deserves, okay? And even if I do look at her I won't lust after her. I'm not going to sit there and entertain thoughts about her, but it doesn't make it easy to give her that respect and that dignity, because all of a sudden I am now looking at her not because I want to see a beautiful person, but because I want to see just a beautiful body. So it is difficult. And the life of chastity, in some ways, I'm glad that it's difficult. I think that it would lose some beauty if it was too easy. There's something satisfying and beautiful about accomplishing something difficult and working towards it, because it's not something that anybody can just pick up and do on their first try. Chastity is one of those things, maintaining governance of the eyes, and you do have to sometimes learn to look away, and it is difficult. Sometimes it might be the hardest thing you do all day, to not look at the girl who's jogging as you're on your commute to work. Maybe that's the hardest thing you're going to do today, but do it for your wife. Do it for somebody else who might be struggling with temptations that are even greater than yours. Those kinds of sacrifices that we make seem like they don't do anything, but when we get to heaven, I believe that we will see every decision we've ever made, and here are the good or bad consequences that flowed from them. A tiny prayer that we say, maybe there's somebody on the other side of the world that God chooses to benefit from that prayer, but and the same with our sin. We are all swimming in the same pool. So when you pee just a little bit in the pool, you're peeing in the pool with all of us, okay? We're all one body. And so you can't sin. If the hand is injured, the whole body suffers. So we have to learn to maintain the basic rules of chastity. You must start there, because you will not grow. I guarantee you that you will not grow in the spiritual life if you cannot live a chaste life and maintain a chaste heart. Because if you cannot keep a heart that is pure, then God cannot reside in it.
Mm. One of my favorite meditations in the Rosary is the agony in the garden. I'm pretty sure you and my listeners are familiar with that painting where Jesus is praying on the rock in the garden, and he's looking up and there's a light coming from above.
Yes.
You know that painting, right? Sort of in greenish gray tones, in my version that I have in my little prayer room. But I like to think of that in sort of like a sci-fi way, where he's looking up, but what he's seeing is he's seeing me, he's watching me, he's watching my every move, he's watching the good that I do by the grace of God, and the good that I refuse to do, or that I omit, or that I spurn in other ways, and the sins that I commit and how I'm harming him. He's watching me, and I really find this a useful meditation. It's very powerful. I'm not saying that I don't sin anymore, but it does help. It does help a lot. And there's a book that I read before I became a monotheist, when I was still an atheist. I read a book that had a profound influence on me, on my conversion. It was called The Vision of God. And it's not about our visualization of God, but God's vision watching us, and how he's always watching. That had a very positive impact on me as an atheist, and it was part of my conversion to monotheism, which a lot of my friends find counterintuitive because they don't like the idea of Big Brother and all that. Where am I going with this? Just the idea of Jesus Christ paying for my sins, I think, is very powerful.
I think another good one, also another sorrowful mystery, is the carrying of the cross, because I think it's good with chastity and maintaining governance of the eyes, because the carrying of the cross is the only station that required Jesus's willpower to take the next step. The crowning with thorns, the scourging at the pillar. He's chained. If you're just chained to a pillar and someone else is whipping you, that doesn't take your own willpower. You just are sitting there being whipped. Now, with God, of course, everything is according to his permissive will. He has to allow it because he's God. But the carrying of the cross, it wasn't somebody abusing him. He had to take the step himself. It was a 100% act of his own will that had to move the cross. And so that's kind of the way it is with chastity. We have to, if there's the billboard that you drive by every day that causes you to go down a bad train of thought, you have to make yourself not look at it. And it is a constant action of the will that is, suffering in some way. But you must learn to do that. And when you practice it, you are right there with Jesus, carrying your cross. Not all crosses are big. Some are big, some are little. But we have to carry all of them because they're ours to carry.
I'm really amazed by Jesus Christ. I should tell you that my conversion to Jesus Christ is the last step in a long chain of conversions, starting with God the Father, and then the saints drew me into the church, and then the priest who gave me instruction was well aware of the fact that I didn't yet believe in the Trinity, and of course, therefore, in Jesus Christ and the Incarnation and all that. But my approach is ongoing, my approach to Jesus Christ, but I am amazed and astonished every day with everything that I meditate on and that I learn about Jesus Christ. But one of the things I find most astonishing is that he didn't submit to the temptation, which I'm sure every one of us would have given into when being taunted and mocked and spat upon and ridiculed and tortured and crucified. Each and every one of us, first and foremost myself, weak and selfish and proud sinner that I am, the temptation would be to use my omnipotence to just kill everybody. I have put myself in that situation. I would have killed everyone, maybe not instantly. Maybe I would have just planted a little seed of this disease in that one and that disease in the other one, and I would just smile to myself as I'm hanging on the cross like, yeah, you wait and see what's happening to you.
Right.
But he didn't do that. I can't believe the restraint and the goodness and the patience and the love of God. It's just mind-boggling. And I think if the atheist could just sit for 5 minutes and think about that, they would be excited to come into organized religion. What's your perspective on the patience and self-restraint and the goodness of God?
Yes, I agree with exactly what you've said, and I've thought about this too, about the humility of God. He who has no reason to be humble, like he really is all that plus a bag of chips. You know what I'm saying? Like, and here he is appearing so ordinary, and people are, spitting on him and taunting him, and, if I were him, I'd be like, look, I made you, you little twerp, okay? The only reason you're here is because of me, and I could kill you at any second. And I think I would be tempted to just reveal my awesome glory, and bow before me now. Like, who's the best now? But he didn't do that. He stayed in his humble, lowly, beat-up form and allowed people to spit on him. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. I just cannot comprehend that level of love.
It's so obvious, the gap between creator and creature. It really is humiliating. I don't know why I'm not crushed unto death by the gap that exists between God's goodness and mine.
Like we should be. Like that should totally happen, right?
Unbelievable. So I'd like you to give your perspective now on your Catholic projects, in particular the Catholic Man show. Tell the listeners a little bit about what it's about, what projects you're involved in, and what you're trying to achieve with it.
Okay, so I'll just give you the quick version since he probably said a lot of this already. It actually started out as we run the Catholic radio station here in Tulsa, and then we just kind of looking at the lineup of radio shows. There was a lot of shows geared specifically to women. Women of Grace is the most obvious one, and there's a lot of other shows that are kind of touchy-feely. Let's talk about your feelings and just stuff that just does not appeal to men. And so we just were going to start something, just a local thing. It's going to be just for Tulsa. That would be for guys, specifically. So we started the Catholic Man Show, and we do 3 things every episode. We open, review, and enjoy a manly beverage. We highlight a man gear of some kind. So we just talk about, like, what kind of tools do we have? Why is a pocket knife manly? There's something manly about it. Why is that? So we want to talk about all this guy stuff we have and why is it so awesome? And then we have a topic for the second half of the show where we're just really 2 regular guys. Like, we don't have degrees or anything. We're just guys. We happened to have a radio station, and so nobody could tell us no, you can't start a show. So we did start a show. But our show is all about returning to a life of virtue, bringing back the virtuous man, the gentleman, the man of yesteryear. Even the word virtue, vir, V-I-R, it means man. Virtue means the power of man. And so as men, especially as Catholic men, we need to strive to live a life dedicated to virtue so that we can live that life we talked about earlier where we are living in accord with God's will, because the virtues are the things that strengthen our soul, that give us the power to withstand temptation, give us the power to bear our crosses, to offer ourselves up. And so we just kind of take a layman's approach to all of these questions. And at the same time, we want to do that in a way that says, hey, we like to smoke cigars and drink whiskey too. And that's okay because we're Catholic and being Catholic is the best. But God made this earth good, and we should enjoy it for its goodness. Whiskey is not bad. For some people, maybe they need to stay completely away from it, and that's awesome. You need to know that about yourself because moderation is different for different people. But smoking a pipe, awesome. Having a glass of whiskey, great. And it needs to be done in moderation. Everything should be done in moderation, except for the theological virtues. Everything has a moderate use. And so what is that? We talk about it, and hopefully, we can all be more present. I feel like there's just so many of us who are walking through life as zombies. We don't think about the things we're doing. We just kind of do them. We don't do anything on purpose. There's a big difference between a supernatural virtue and a natural virtue. From the outside, they might look the same. You can have the natural virtue of honesty where I have learned, I have the habit of telling the truth. But the supernatural virtue of honesty is one that flows from love of God. And that is what is going to be meritorious for us and what's going to benefit our souls in a deep way. And so we need to have supernatural virtues, not simply natural virtues. We need to wake up and pursue Christ vigorously, because that's what we do as men. We rise to a challenge and we take it head on. That's almost like our calling. We beat our chest. It's deep down within us. We know we're called to do something awesome. And sometimes the awesome is small and doesn't look super glorious. But actually, once we come to love Christ, we understand that those small hidden things actually have the most glory of any other thing.
Mm. You bring to mind, among other saints, he's not a saint yet, but G.K. Chesterton. Can you just name for me very quickly 3 of your favorite saints? Whether they have a connection to this virtue and manliness, of course, is optional, but just 3 of your favorite saints, please.
Okay. Well, the first one is maybe cheating. I don't know. St. Michael is my patron saint. He's my confirmation saint. I've always loved St. Michael. The radio station we run, it's called St. Michael Radio. Also, St. John Paul II, he's the Pope of basically my life. When I look back on most of my life, he was the Pope. He gave us the theology of the body, which changed my life. I was exposed to that listening to Christopher West tapes when I was like 12. We just listened to him in the car. And I remember, even as a kid, telling my mom, you know what? When I hear this, I know it's true. That just had a deep impact on me. So I really have a deep love for St. John Paul II. And the other one is St. Faustina. I'm Polish. I don't know if that gives me a deeper affinity for her, but I love St. Faustina. I care for her. She really means a great deal to me, and I cannot recommend her diary enough. It's one of the deepest spiritual writings that I've encountered.
I just bought it on Amazon for my Kindle.
Well, it will take a while to read. It's kind of long.
Okay.
But the whole thing is absolutely incredible because it's from beginning to end chock full of Jesus's words to her that he commanded her to write down. And actually, she at one point she was writing down everything that Jesus said, and she said, "No, I can't do this," and she burned it all. And then Jesus came to her and like, "No, that was the wrong thing to do." And so she had to start over. But it's like amazing. She's like the mystic of mystics. She would bear the crown of thorns for several hours in order to prevent someone from committing a mortal sin, just crazy stuff like that from beginning to end. It's amazing.
Wow. If you would please just name 3 things that I can do to be a better Catholic, just quickly off the top of your head. What can I do to become a better Catholic?
You can pray more. You can go to Mass 1 more time a week. However many times you go to Mass every week, add 1, and your life will change. And 3, if you're not fasting, I would fast on a scheduled basis. The thing about prayer and fasting, I don't know if that's, I kind of put those in the same category, but they're not exactly the same. You have to have a plan. You can't just say, yeah, I'm going to pray more. I'm going to do that. You must say, I will pray at this time. It's on the calendar when I pray. And I don't do other stuff at that time because I'm busy. I'm praying. Adoration. If you don't have an adoration hour, I think that's a must-have. So I don't know if we'll just call that 3. I think it's either 3 or 4 or 2 or 3.
You guys are both individuals, very unique and different, but at the same time, I felt like it's just an extension of last night's interview, really.
Yeah, well, like I said, we hang out a lot.
There is one more question. Who is better at basketball, you or Adam?
Yeah, what a jerk. Here's what happened, okay? We used to play as children, and then one day he went way back to like the very end of the driveway and said, if I make this shot, I win this game and every game we've ever played and every game we ever will play. And I was like, sure, dude, whatever. Because he's like at the end of the driveway, for Pete's sake. And he just launched it, and I just sat there in horror as it went off the backboard and into the goal. And for years, we would play, and I would beat him, and he'd be like, yeah, but we both know I win, okay? And it was like, gah! And then one day, in the middle of winter, in college, we were just being dumb and jumping in the pool. And I said, if I can swim 7 lengths of this pool, I win every basketball game. And he's like, fine, because he didn't think I could do it. I was going to die before I came out of that pool, and I made it. So he knows fair and square. Anyway, he's being stingy.
Yeah. Interesting, very interesting. Well, thanks for that. You've given me a lot to think about.
Hey, David, it was a joy and a pleasure. You're quite the interviewer.
Thank you very much. I'm an amateur, as we say. But like I told Adam, I buy perpetual masses for all my guests. So I'm going to buy one for you and your family.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Do you drink whiskey?
Not yet.
Okay, well, yeah, we have a Glencairn glass to send you.
Yeah, that's what he told me. That's very nice.
It's a great idea to get a perpetual mass. Who do you do that through?
The Scalabrini Fathers of St. Charles Borromeo.
We have a local Benedictine order, the Clear Creek Monastery here in Oklahoma. They're hardcore contemplatives. I might see if they could do that. Because that's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's like a Catholic hack that you have right there.
I highly recommend it to everyone, and I just think it's so amazing. Infinite graces every day till the end of time. You can't get much better than that, can you?
That's how much I need. I need that much.
Yeah, because I really don't want to spend too much time, if possible, in purgatory. So I'm kind of hoping that maybe some of these graces will redound to my glory and shave off some of that time in purgatory.
I'm sure they will. Yeah, that's like one thing. You hear people say, I'm just hoping to get into purgatory. It's like, well, fine. I'm hoping to skip it, okay? Like, I think you should, aim a little higher, dude.
Yeah, I did buy perpetual mass for all the holy souls in purgatory too. So every day there's a mass being said for all the holy souls in purgatory. I'm pretty sure that that's going to bear some fruit for me. Not that I'm being mercenary here. I'm trying not to be. I mean, my tendency is to be a mercenary, but I'm trying not to be with God's grace. But still, just objectively speaking, I mean, I think that can't hurt, right? And I need all the graces I can get. So
No, yeah, because they know whose prayers got them out of purgatory, and so they will pray for that person. They have a special fondness for that person, I would
yeah,
imagine.
I would imagine. Yeah, I mean, I found a dog on the beach that was stranded by the tide that came in, and he was so happy when I made the small sacrifice of like getting wet and going and swimming over and saving him. But he was so happy and grateful. I mean, I think it's just human nature and obviously
Yeah,
canine nature too.
I mean, so if a dog can do it, how much more a soul who has just obtained perfection?
The economy of salvation, it's so amazing the way that God allows us to be causes. This is what Pascal famously said, that the reason we have prayer is because God wanted us to have the dignity of being causes. So that's it really is amazing, though, the Catholic faith. I'm glad to have found my way in, and I'm glad to have met you. And now that I've interviewed you both, I can have the pleasure of going back and actually listening to your podcast, because I never have. I didn't want to be prejudiced, you see.
Ah, I see.
So I'll go and I'll listen to. Do you have a recommendation for any particular place to start, or?
Oh, I don't know. I'm awfully fond of our episode we did on leisure. He and I take turns coming up with the topic.
Okay.
So, like, he'll do all the research, and the other one of us is kind of intentionally ignorant. That way, maybe we'll ask the questions that the listener is thinking anyway. So the episodes that I've done, there were 2 episodes that I did that were just like mind-blowing for me. One was on beauty, and then one on leisure. And both of those, I realized I didn't know anything about beauty or anything about what leisure is.
Until Adam explained it to you.
Yeah, until I read about it and kind of researched. It's like we're made for leisure. We're made to rest. Eternal rest. That's what we're made for. And so it just like changed my whole perspective.
Amazing. It's really amazing. So keep up the good work. I'm really proud of you guys for doing that. And I thank you for your service, as they say. But at the end of all my interviews, I just ask my guests to give a little closing thought, a message of hope, really, for the listener. So what do you think you might be able to say to someone that might be out there listening now?
Oh, man. I would tell them, whether you believe in him or not, God created you and loves you more than you will ever fathom. And you may feel like your life has no purpose sometimes. And I guarantee you that your life has a purpose and that he has given you a mission that is far greater than anything you can imagine. And that your purpose on this earth is specific. He has a job for you. He has things that he earnestly desires for you to accomplish, great things, things that will bring you greater joy than you can even imagine. And if you would only open up to him and allow him to enter your life, I promise you that he will, and that you will know him, and that your life will change. David, I think this has happened to you. It has happened to millions of people throughout history. The God of the universe has built you with love, and his love for you is intense. He is pursuing you, and all you have to do is let him in. And if you've done that, the beautiful thing is that you can do it over and over and over again. And every time you fall more in love with him because you come to learn how much he loves you deeper and deeper and deeper. And if you would simply try it, you will live a life of beauty and love and sacrifice. It will be hard. Living the Christian life is not easy, but it is worth it. It is so beautiful. You will come to learn the joy of dying for somebody else, the joy of truly loving and learning to give yourself away, and the peace of knowing that everything that we do in this life, all of our small sufferings, we will be rewarded for if we would simply suffer for love of our neighbor and for love of him, if we would pursue a life of virtue and a life of God's will, then your life will change. And I pray that it will happen for you, because God is real and he loves you.
If you like your worldview, if you think it's swell. If you got some questions, ask me and I'll tell. All you got to do is ask. All you got to do is ask.